You're listening to episode 16 of the Air Hug Community Podcast. You're listening to the Air Hug Community Podcast. I'm your host, Judy Arizosa, and on this podcast, I bring you conversations and stories from guests and myself that inspire us to thrive on a higher level. We talk about things like relationships and habits for optimal health and how we see the world. Whether you are a mother or an other, the Air Hug community is here to help you realize that improving the lives of others will boomerang back to you exponentially. And remember, not to be too serious. Life is better with a daily dose of smiles and air hugs. Today, I have a really fun interview. So the guest actually threw me for a loop because when we got on to Zoom, which is how we do our interviews, she said, let's keep the camera on. It's going to be so much fun. And I'm like, what? What do you mean, let's keep the camera on? I always do these interviews with the camera off because we're just talking, right? Well, she pointed out that it's really cool to kind of read each other, right, through body language and just see how it goes. And since this was really open-ended, I really didn't have an agenda for this. I just wanted the opportunity to chat with this very interesting person. So we kept the camera on, and I think it was really exciting. So, ladies and gentlemen, I introduce to you the Pam Sherman. Welcome, everybody, back to the Air Hug Community Podcast. And we are doing something a little bit different today. Pam has encouraged me, now the cat's out of the bag. Our guest today is Pam Sherman, but she kind of gave me a little challenge. She said, let's do this recording with the camera on. So you may not know this, but we have the camera on. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce to you Pam Sherman. And so, Pam, I want you just to tell us, who is Pam Sherman and what is an outlaw leader?
It's interesting. That question is always the most difficult question. Tell me about yourself, right? Because we are so many different things. But for me, at the core, my core word is defining word is energy. And so my mission and my purpose in life is to share my energy with the world. My mission in this time in my life is to help individuals, leaders, and I believe leadership isn't about hierarchy or position. It is about who you are and how you show up in the world, but to help themselves present their stories and themselves with passion. So an outlaw leader, and this sort of came out of the idea that I used to be in law. I used to be a lawyer, so and now I'm an outlaw. But that there's, all the old laws of leadership are out. So why not create new, what I call the outlaws of leadership? And I've been coaching leaders all over the world I like to say, from Milwaukee to Morocco, from Cincinnati to Sydney and Saudi Arabia and every place in between. And I realized that people all over the world pretty much want the same thing. They want to do great work, impact their families, their communities, live great lives themselves. And when everything comes into alignment about who you are and how you show up in the world, internally and externally, that's when you get to do that with some ease and flow. And I think I call it having an edge in the best possible way. And that edge template has really served me as a process by which to help grow outlaw leaders.
That fascinates me. I just, before we got on, hopped over to your website and looked at your outlaw, what are they, minutes? Outlaw?
The Outlaw Leadership Minutes.
When
we went into lockdown, I just, I said, let's capture some, because I've been thinking about this for a long time. My brand, as a personal brand, was developed as The Edge, because that's the process by which I work to explore, dream, grow, and excite. And I also had a column called The Suburban Outlaw. And this is actually a very big deal because this week a very successful column, 15 years across the USA Today network, but mainly published by the Democrat and Chronicle in Rochester, New York. And I'm resigning a successful column of 15 years because I want to focus on you are what you pay attention to. And I want to focus on the outlaws of leadership and sharing them with the world. So we decided to, like, literally on March 13th, as everything was getting shut down, I went in with a camera and said, let's just throw these out there. And it's all the tenets that I believe in on how leaders should show up in the best possible way, by connecting with their audience and by having a vision that's clearly articulated, by understanding stories from the past and growing out of their comfort zone. They can excite. So there's the sort of the EDGE template. That's what we did. I think we did 10 of them. It was a lot of fun in 1 hour.
I was fascinated listening to them, and I'm going to put a link in them to the show notes, because when I think of a leader, I don't just think of a leader of a corporation. I have like a mom brain, and I'm not like ashamed of that or anything, but I think of like moms as
are leaders.
Moms are leaders, like at the very core, and they do it for a long time.
You don't stop, right?
Right, never.
And it's funny, but it's really funny because I have 2 kids. And my son wrote his college essays on how we run our family like a Fortune 500 company. They like have a mission statement, and the family. Oh, and if you had to have a family meeting because we had to debrief everything. But I actually think that what that instilled in them was something that any mother does with intentionality. This is the character that we expect from you. These are the values that are important to our family. How do you want your kids to show up in all the places that they have to show up? And my kids always knew what that was. So we joke about it. Like, I always say, remember to be kind, be grateful, be independent. Those are like 3 themes that I used for them. Mm-hmm. And they tease me all the time. They're like, what is that? What do I have to be? And I'm like, they put different words in. I'm like, it's always been very clear. Be kind to others, be grateful, because that's, an attitude that will help you internally. One is about the external, one is about the internal. And be independent means I don't have to pay for you.
Yes, off the payroll. We talked about that earlier, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, I have to add in that my parents always taught us, always be grateful and kind. And it's interesting.
Add the third one and you can,
And they did, actually, because I remember they were very old fashioned. I'm the youngest of 8. So they raised their kids in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. Wow. So I'm the caboose of a long line of old fashioned post World War II, like baby boomer people.
That's amazing. I always say my mother had 4. And I'm the youngest of 4. And I always used to joke, I would never want to repeat my mother's effort, because it was really hard with just 4. When you think about 8, right? That's remarkable. But it's interesting, because even at that, being the youngest and raised at a time of great foment in the 70s, if you think about that,
yeah,
still the values are the same. Right? They didn't change from the 40s to the 70s.
No, they really didn't. And it wasn't like grow up and get a husband. It was at the dinner table. It's like, you need to figure out what you can do so that you can be independent. How can you support yourself? Don't count on like Prince Charming coming along. That was definitely a clear message, as well as be grateful and kind. So
right. And so that's why I think leadership, and in particularly for women, and look, we've got all sorts of issues that are arising about women in the workforce who are still having to deal with all the at-home issues, right? Mm-hmm. The leadership of women is remarkable because of all the things we have to do, but we also have to take time to be. That's ultimately, and I'm sure that's a big part of what you do with your clients, and the work that you do is to ensure that they think of themselves as their whole self, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm basically in the self-care business. So if you think about it.
Yes.
And, I'm not the slave driver type, but when they walk in or when they sign on to a live workout, it is about, this is their time. This is your time. If you've got a kid in the room, fine, but this is your time. It's between you and the screen, or we're here, and that's how it goes.
But isn't that leadership? I mean, knowing how to prioritize your time. And I mean, it's a critical component of leadership. and women, I don't know if you're, obviously your clients and your audience is a lot of, is everyone across the, the gender spectrum. But if I think about it, women in particular, actually, there's all these studies that women actually exceed men in every leadership competency. Seriously. So like, the fact that women have this capacity for leadership, but they don't prioritize thinking about it and ensuring that they're showing up in the world with their full selves. So the people that come to you and actually take care of their bodies and their wellness, that's brilliant, because it's the old oxygen mask first.
Yes.
Before it hit the person
They are
next to
leaders.
you. Right.
Yeah.
That's leadership.
That is leadership. It is. And it's interesting. I was interested, speaking of interesting, I took a little peek, and you spoke about core values and your core values. And I love that you wrote that you said humor was one of your core values.
It is. It hasn't changed. So we are many values, right? Mm-hmm. We might have 100 values that make up who we are, right? A value is a behavior that we choose to pay attention to. And a value can also be the formation, I think, of how we want to show up as a leader. So I've always had my three are integrity, which is my own definition of integrity, because I view integrity as excellence also. Accountability, doing what I say I'm going to do. I always laugh.
Living by example. Yeah.
Living by example. Like, integrity is much richer to me. And I think that's the thing about values. It's about what it means to you. And then, are you showing up that way to everybody else? How you perceive that way? But the second one used to be family. And then, family first. And then my family just pissed me off all the time. I'm sorry, can I say that here?
Yeah. So, you can say anything. I decided
to call it connectedness, because it expands my family to humans that I might encounter who reach out to me, or that I encounter in my work and travels. And it just felt bigger. And I think that's like, there's nothing better to me than meeting a complete stranger and making a connection, as you and I did when you reached out. And then the third thing is humor, because I think that levity, and apparently was talking to somebody about women in leadership, and apparently there's a new book coming out about women in humor and how it's a leadership competency that we need to. I can't wait. I'm sort of a leadership junkie, as you can tell.
Yeah.
But I think it's just brilliant. And I'm really mad that somebody else wrote it, because it's really at the core of who I am.
Doesn't mean you can't write it according to you, right?
There you go. That's true.
Absolutely.
That's what I tell people. It's like, there's only one of you. I just think humor, it dissipates conflict. Humor done in a generous way, right? Self-deprecating humor can hurt you more than anything and rock your confidence, right? Mm-hmm. But I think humor with a self-awareness about yourself is a beautiful thing, right? And that's, it's funny, because I used to be the kind of, I was the funny girl in high school who would make fun of herself, thinking, well, I'll make fun of myself first, so you don't. And that humor has switched to a generous humor that's delighting in what the world has to offer. And just, I love, for me, I have all sorts of platforms for my content, but I put up something on Facebook, and I got a teenager's response, and it was a picture my husband took of me with a tag hanging out the back of my shirt. And he says, "Is that new?" And I'm like, and I'm just in the dishwasher. No, why would you ask? And I think it just resonates right now. We need humor. We really do, as a release to. Humor is, if done the right way, can connect people who wouldn't otherwise be connected. It can help create a bridge. It can be the thing that opens our hearts to each other.
Yeah, and it's something we definitely need more of in 2020. But I have two things to say about humor. First of all, when we were going to restaurants at that brief period between just a few weeks ago, actually, we were at a restaurant, and there was this couple. They were like far away. Actually, it was a party of four. And the woman, her back was to us, and she had a tag. And we were laughing, and I'm like, never saw them before. And so I thought, nah, do we go up to her? Do we don't? I'm like, and Ed's like, maybe we just let her go home and figure it out when she gets home. Let's not spoil her evening. Because she was really happy. You could tell they were having a good time. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think we should stop that.
In her new outfit that
Yeah.
she probably bought in February, but she hasn't had a chance to wear.
Yes. Yeah. And now she probably won't wear it again till 6 more months.
Exactly. Well, there is, the old, well, I'm going to keep the tag on because I'm really proud how little I paid for this. There's all sorts, honestly, that's the thing. It's about, it's the story of it's the story of that moment. And that's a big part of my work, is helping leaders craft their story of their vision story for themselves and their organizations, if they work in an organization, their families, but then also crafting stories from small moments reveal so much about who you are. I love that you had the integrity to say, shouldn't we go up and tell her? Like, if you'd gone up with a knife and taken it off, it would have been
Excuse
great.
me.
Excuse me. But I honestly, I think it's the story of the humor. It's not the humor itself, isn't it? It's like we see ourselves in that. And that's what great storytelling is all about. How do we formulate our view of the world? It's only through, I like to say, a story. A vision is a story that just hasn't been written yet, so you get to write it. But a story from the past can illuminate the path to the future, because it's a lived experience that teaches you all sorts of lessons that can help you along that vision.
Okay, speaking of stories, just popped into my head. I told you I wasn't really sure where we were going to go with our chat today, but Jiva Theater, Irma Bombeck, Pam Sherman. Tell us about this.
So
I was in the audience.
I'm just so honored that you came. So I started my career as an attorney, but I had always had a dream. From the time I was literally in the second grade, I wanted to be, I used to play piano with the door wide open, hoping that a wandering talent agent would be wandering the streets of Staten Island and cast me on in Annie. I wanted to be an Annie on Broadway, and I didn't want to be a boring orphan or Annie. I wanted to be the evil Miss Hannigan. It's a much better part, right? She's the evil. She's such a good part. But I always wanted to be an actor, and I came from a very traditional family, and despite a love of culture, that was like being an actor was akin to being an axe murderer. Like you don't do that. You use your education to do other things. So I pushed my dreams aside. And a funny thing happened on the way to my secure profession. My law firm went out of business. There I am, practicing law. And another recession a long time ago and far away. Mm-hmm. And I'm lucky I'm married to a dreamer, an entrepreneur. And he said, well, now's your chance. Why don't you, take the leap and be an actor? And so I became a full-time working actor in Washington, D.C. Go ahead, cue the jokes. But then we moved to Rochester, and I was a busy working actor, working in film, theater, and television. Had small children. I moved to Rochester, and actually now I think Rochester, New York has a really vibrant, creative community. But there was one professional theater in town at the time, Jiva Theater. Theater. I went there, I'm an actor from Washington, and they're like, yeah, good. Okay. And then I always say that was the best thing that ever happened to me, because I then had to retool my dreams for real life. And I got lucky. I became a writer and decided to write my column, which became, really the focus of my creative outlet. And I just said, okay, I'm going to help leaders become better actors. That was the start of my business 12 years ago. So I put the acting aside, and I really found my thrill in performance, in speaking to audiences and just in other ways, right? I think you have to take a dream, and if real life doesn't work out that way, take the elements of the dream and put it into your life somehow, right?
Ooh, I like that.
However, it wasn't enough, because I got a phone call, and I had been, for fun, I helped nonprofits as an auctioneer, because I never met a microphone I didn't like, as you can tell.
I can tell.
And I had started doing it for Jiva, and it was so much fun. I mean, standing on a stage and browbeating people to give money. I'm really good at it, Judy.
Oh, wow. I'll keep that in mind.
It's like my inner Beyonce. Like, I put on my Sasha Fierce and I just get on stage and I don't even know what I'm saying, but it's great fun. And I guess they got to know me well enough that the artistic director called me up about 3 years ago and he said, I'm planning my season and I read the script and I need to meet with you. And I'm like, I don't have time. I'm going to, I was busy. I have a client list. I'm busy working with leaders all over, corporate leaders and individual leaders. And he said, no, I need to meet with you. And I said, well, you can come to my health club. I'm going to be finishing a yoga class. Like the artistic director of the actors don't do that.
Did you really say that?
I did. Come to my health club. And he met me at the cafe and we're having small talk. And I'm like, okay, I got a flight to catch. And he slides this envelope across the table. And he said, so here's the play. And I can't hear anybody else's voice but yours. And I opened it up and I saw the title, At Wit's End. And I knew right away it was about Irma Bombeck because that was the title of her column. Mm-hmm. And I burst into tears. I just started crying. And I said, well, I'm not an actor anymore. I can't do this. It's a one-woman show. And oh, by the way, it's 3 weeks of, it was 2 weeks of rehearsal, 3 weeks of rehearsal, and then 3 weeks on stage. Like, I don't have time for that. I'm busy.
That was intense.
Yeah. And I said no. And then my husband's like, you've got to do this. So I had been writing a column that was reminiscent of Irma Bombeck, for, at that point, 10 years, over 10 years. We all as women owe her, and for your audience who doesn't know who she was the most prolific columnist in America for about 20 years. She was in 900 newspapers and the Johnny Carson Show and Good Morning America. I mean, she started writing about her family on an ironing board at her bedroom, right? And she produced a column 3 times a week till she died, and unexpectedly in her early 60s. Crazy,
right? 3 times a week.
3 times a week. Like, for me, putting out a column bi-weekly for 9 years and monthly was a challenge. Just topics and thinking about that. And then she wrote 13 other books that had nothing to, that were like, she didn't like take the columns and publish them like I did. Mm-hmm. She wrote a whole nother book of columns and she's delightful. She also was a Catholic housewife from Dayton, Ohio, who felt that people needed to pay attention to, you call them the moms, but at the time it was the housewives, and that no one is paying attention to the work of women in the home. So she called up the women who were fighting for the ERA at the time, like Gloria Steinem and Bella Abzug, and she said, I want to help fight that fight. So unusual for, again, a conservative, valued Catholic woman to recognize that, she could have a voice in what was a very progressive movement. But I just, that's what I loved about her, was that it wasn't for her about politics and progressive or liberal or conservative. It was about women need to be valued no matter what they do or where they are. So I got to do it. I got to be in the play, and we did.
No, you were the play.
Well, it was just me, but no,
it was just you.
But it was me, and it's a collaboration. The director, Mark Cuddy, is an amazing guy from Jiva, and I mean, you can't do it without all the other incredible theater artists. But then we kept, so many people wanted to come, we kept extending. Then they asked me to come back the next year. And then they started getting requests to do it around the country. So we got to do it for 3 weeks at the Denver Center for the Performing Arts. And we sold out almost every show there. And also in Buffalo at the Shays Theater. And we were all set to go to Iowa, of all places. It was in Des Moines, Iowa, for Mother's Day in May. And it got, obviously, theater is in a,
it's in a holding pattern, unfortunately.
So
it's one of the things I miss the most, I will say.
Going into a dark theater and not knowing what to expect, right? So
The
exciting.
coolest thing.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, like, I wasn't even going to go to, and I was like, yeah, a couple of girlfriends were like, come on, we're going to go. You don't have to drive. Okay, I'll go. I was like on the edge of my seat. And I kept saying, it took me like, I didn't, whatever, if they give you a program, like I never look at them. And I'm like, is it just her? Like, where are the other people?
We did have children. There were sounds of them, that start stampeding down the stairs,
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've become really good friends with the playwrights and even got to meet Irma Bombeck's only granddaughter, who lives near Denver. And she came, Eva, she's adorable. She's my son's age. And they found out that they were pregnant with her the day Irma died. So she'd never met her
Oh,
grandmother.
never
But,
met her.
the legacy of this woman's work. Were you a fan of hers?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean,
I
I love
remember
the
reading her
stories.
column. Hmm.
People came up to me, like one woman sent me a copy of the column that she had kept for like 40 years. So cool. So I hope as we think about, the ephemeral nature of the internet, right? Like things going away, like your recordings this is your version of your column, right? This is your
Yeah.
work that, to have it last and have a legacy of helping people learn new things through through their earbuds is the same
Yeah.
thing that Irma was doing 50 years ago.
Right.
Right?
With our eyes in print. Yeah. I think it's very intimate to have the privilege to be talking into someone's ears and to be sharing stories. And really, the whole purpose of Air Hug Community was to get out there and share stories, and I
Yeah,
love,
and I love it because I think a story is like a hug, right? It releases the same uh, um, hormones, right?
yeah,
A great story.
oxytocin, sure.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about what a hug does for you, it does the exact same thing. So a great story um, can, help make you feel grateful. It can make you feel sad, which is okay. Like that's,
Hmm.
gives you a range of feelings. A story well told can actually, can make you do things, right? It can actually make you take action. So I think that's why storytelling is so important to me. And by the way, hugs are really important to me. Isn't there some theory that you have to have a hug, like a physical hug, like 20 times a day to raise your serotonin levels? Have
There's
you?
something, in fact, I was just talking about that with another guest, and I don't know what it is. I should look it up. We're going to have to do a podcast on hugs.
I think you do have to do a podcast on
On
hugs
hugs.
because I think, by the way, there is a charity called Hugs right here in town that's quite remarkable. Help Us Give Smiles.
Oh,
It's founded by Dr. Vito Quatella, and he goes
oh,
around the world uh, doing taking missions of doctors and nurses and incredible healthcare professionals to do maliofacial surgeries on children. And it is, when I think about even the word hug, doesn't it, like when you think about that mission, your mission, these are the kinds of leadership things that just move me. Like people who want to make people feel better. It's that
yeah.
simple, right?
It is all about uplifting others, and building a sense of community in one way or another. And we can't really do that physically in large groups right now, but we
Yeah, but
can,
even sometimes you can't do it, right? Like, so
yeah,
an airwave hug, as you call it, an air hug,
an air
uh,
hug.
because, I think it's about reaching the people. To me, I love it when a complete stranger writes me an email about a column I wrote, or like, wow, you read that, because, my family doesn't read it. So thank you. And I do remember I'm a hugger. So if you want to talk about hugs, a story about a hug, I'll never forget. I was leading a leadership thing with a group of clients, and I'm just like, oh, I'm a hugger. And this woman looked at me and she goes, and I'm not. And she stepped back and put her hands up. And I said, I respect that. That's so fine. So I actually went to a great retreat with an amazing resource. Who's a friend now. I love her, Grace Sirocco. She's up in Canada, St. Catharines, I think, in that area. So,
Mhm.
Niagara on the Lake, she does a lot of women's retreats and couples retreats there.
Mm.
And she said we're not hugging right. That
There's a wrong way to hug? How could there be a
yes,
wrong
well,
way?
there's a right way to hug. So
Okay.
she said what you have to do is go try and position yourself heart to heart. Look the person in the eye. This is what I didn't do with this woman. Look them in the eye
Okay.
and get that connection so they feel safe that you're going to touch them.
Mhm.
Then don't go just like awkwardly in. It's heart to heart, a heart hug, she calls it. So you go heart to heart, and as you hold each other, don't do the baby burping slap because it's very diminishing. She said, just hold that hug heart to heart, and then step back without talking and look the person in the eye again. It's a moment that is so special. And she called it a heart hug. And I came home and I said, we've been hugging all wrong to my family. So I highly recommend that you try it. And, by the way, because your heart is here, it's on your left side.
Mhm.
And everyone's like, well, it feels different because you're just going into the left, the
It's the
left.
left boob. Yeah.
And I'm like, no, it feels different because you're literally choosing to touch someone's heart.
Yeah. Well,
So
there you go.
that is my gift to you and your listeners.
That made my day. So I can't wait for my special heart person to come home so I can hug him with my heart and his
And you
heart.
stop, look him in the eye. He's going to be like, what are you doing? Let's just hug.
Okay. This is going to be very significant. That's all I have to say about that.
Awesome.
A heart hug. Mark my words on that one. Okay. Hearts are special to us. Hearts are
Yes.
special to everyone, but
Right. And we have to hold them dear. So it was a fascinating thing. I mean, to me, that's the kind of story that can provide a takeaway, an action that someone can take out of this and use. And that, when you ask me about what outlaw leadership is, it's all about that. It's about how we behave in the world and what actions do we take that impact others, right?
yeah, it's a ripple effect. There's always a ripple effect
I
of
love
one
that.
sort, yeah, of one sort or another. I just have one more little outlaw thing to bring up, and you brought it up earlier, talking to your kids, but you talked about gratitude as a leader, practicing gratitude as a leader.
So interesting because, a lot of companies have recognition programs
Hmm.
and, uh, they're like, I say thank you. I tease
Yeah,
my husband. I always say the thank you is implied. And he says, no, it's not. You actually need to say it out loud. There's two kinds of gratitude. One is outward, where you're really connecting to people through gratitude, thanking them for their contribution, recognizing them. But the other gratitude that I think we don't pay enough attention to is the internal gratitude. What are we grateful for? And how that can actually help. And, all
yeah,
the studies around happiness and, just writing down 3 things you're grateful for every day can actually, over a period of time, raise your serotonin levels. And then also even writing 3 positive things. That's the research of a guy named Sean Aker and all the gurus of positive psychology.
hmm,
But I find and I go through some dark times, I think we all do, when I stop and consider with gratitude what I have, it creates plenty instead of what's lacking. And I've had to stop and, oh yeah, I got to do that gratitude, especially in the dark of winter, do the gratitude journal. I think it expands you as a leader because then you're more apt to act with gratitude towards those you serve and those you lead, right? And it's amazing how it can be a motivator because, there's all sorts of research that people leave a job because not because of like the big CEO beyond, it's their one-on-one manager didn't say thank you or didn't recognize
do
them.
they feel underappreciated?
So, you know, think about a mom and she says things like, it's thankless. And the answer is, oh my gosh, we should be all so thankful. And especially, it shouldn't be a Thanksgiving thing. That's
No, it's true.
it's an everyday thing. So I actually think that's a great takeaway. I hope that people will stop and take a breath. And we all know this, if we actually pay attention to what we are, what we pay attention to. But do we actually stop and be intentional about gratitude?
Well, that's the difference, is being intentional, and it's interesting because, well, number one, that's the name of my business. I don't know if you know that. It's Grateful Fitness.
Love
Yeah. And in fact, I'm wearing our shirt. You can see it. The world can't, but
I
it's
love it. Grit and
plus
attitude.
equals
Oh,
gratitude. Yeah.
that's brilliant.
I didn't think of it. One of my clients did years ago, and she's like, we need to put that on shirts. I'm like, well, let's do it. So,
Well, honestly, if what you live by is both the name of your business and can be placed on a t-shirt that looks that good, then that is, that is the best billboard ever. I always say that, like, if it's a really good theme that you want in your life, if you can put it on a t-shirt. So I love it. Grit plus attitude is grateful. Yeah. Look, we all know that grit and resilience, that those people who have those qualities in their life, it all starts with gratitude. Like, they're willing to let things slide. They, I have a 90-year-old mother. This is probably a good way to end around Thanksgiving, who I got a chance to see inside for the first time for 6 months, when I was on a business trip last week. And she said, I didn't think my life would come to this, because she's in a senior living home, and my mother was a therapist. She was a psychoanalyst.
oh my
very
goodness.
vibrant life.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, Mom, I looked around. She's well taken care of. She's in a beautiful place. She's got pictures of my family, my dad and family all around.
Yeah.
If you got to shift to, and I'm telling my 90-year-old mother, she looked at me, she goes, you're right, Pamela, you're right. So I hope it's a great Thanksgiving theme, but I love that it runs through every aspect of your life every single day, right?
It does. And the journal is a big part of it. And, sometimes you don't want to do that journal, and other times you want to do it twice a day. Nobody's motivated all the time, but sometimes you just have to do it anyway, and you always feel better after, even if it's writing down 3 things to be thankful for.
Well, and it's funny. I think it's about your internal muscle, right? You work on the whole person and the whole body. But for me, if you don't keep exercising the gratitude muscle, the vision muscle, the muscle that will give you the edge that you want, right? That's then
that's where it all starts.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So one final question. What are you excited about these days?
I'm really excited about putting all the things I've learned from leaders around the world and sharing their stories, and sharing my own story of outlaw leadership and how I developed it, and how I think it can really impact and make a difference in the world. Because to me, that's really why we're all here, to touch one person at a time in some way with who we are. So that excites me. I'm also excited about this is crazy. It's my first Thanksgiving at home without getting on the road, where I get to actually cook in my house. I don't even know if I know how to do it, but I think you just put the thing in the oven and it cooks itself, right?
Piece of cake. You'll manage.
Very excited about that. And I'm excited to meet you and to be a part of this community. So thank you so much.
Yeah, well, thank you for taking the time out. I am thrilled that this came together, and I'm really glad that we didn't really rehearse this very much before. It's kind of fun just to see where conversation goes.
Well, I think you're an amazing interviewer, so you really got me thinking, and I love that you asked me. So thank you so much. Yeah, I want to ask you a question.
Okay, we're still on.
Yeah, so I want to make sure that they can find me at
yes.
www.thepamsherman.com, because apparently there's a fitness expert named Pam Sherman, but that's not me. Definitely not me. And so they can find Outlaw Leadership, Suburban Outlaw columns, everything about the work that I do is there. So I really appreciate your holding on to make sure we recorded that.
Absolutely. And all of that is going to be in the show notes because you have given me that already. So I will make sure that all gets in the show notes and you can all find Pam. And I urge you to listen to those Outlaw Minutes. So, all righty. So many great points in this interview today, from gratitude to, humor and kindness and understanding that who you are and how you show up in the world is actually leadership. And you are what you pay attention to. So listen, thank you so much for listening today. Could you do me one more favor? Please take a screenshot of this and share this on your social media. I think this is an awesome episode to just get into some deep conversations. And check back here every Tuesday for new episodes of the Air Hug Community.